I'm going to show you one of the most exciting games played at the Tata Steel Chess Masters 2024. We're going into the final round with 5 players being in the lead. Among them, Anish Giri, the Dutchman, is in a must-win situation and he's playing with the white pieces against Max Warmerdam. And this game is absolutely insane. You will definitely enjoy it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I will tell you later what happened in this event, and probably in the next videos I will cover some more games from this event. But first, let's see what Anish Giri did against Max Warmerdam. Here we go. One knight f3, maybe a small surprise, although at the very top players, they should be able to play basically everything. And I think Anish really wanted to surprise Max with his opening choice, because after the move d5, he goes for the move e3. This is gaining some popularity lately. Solid move. And after the move knight f6, white goes for the move b3. He wants to fianchetto. It's queen's bishop. e6, bishop b2. And the bishop goes to d6. Now white plays here the move c4. So this is modern way of playing. White consciously keeps the pawn on d2. Not really intending to put the pawn on d4. Now the diagonal for the bishop is still open. Black is going to castle, knight c3, and since white doesn't place the pawn on d4, now black goes for the move c5. Very principled way of playing, trying to gain control over the center. And now the traditional way of playing here for white is to take on d5, and after taking back with the pawn, white would go for the move d4, and very likely we end up with a isolated queen's pawn on d5. The pawn on d4 will be exchanged against the pawn on c5. Black is absolutely okay in such positions. He has a pawn weakness, but a lot of piece activity. But here the big surprise. Instead of taking on d5, Giri goes for the move g4. Very exciting idea. Always this flank attack, with the idea to kick the knight away from f6, and that knight is very important as it does have still control over the pawn on d5. But how should black react? He can take the pawn on g4, but then after rook g1, it's already getting very dangerous. The knight is under an attack. If the knight goes away, you got to reckon with huge threats against the pawn on g7. So obviously, you're not going to take the pawn on g4. There are various other possibilities. Knight c6 was played in the game. Max Warmerdam is ignoring the threat, and after the move g5, he brings the knight to e4. So now, of course, white can take on e4, but if you do take back, then the knight on f3 is under attack, and then later on the pawn on g5 can be taken. So you don't want to take, and therefore first the pawn on h4 is getting some support with the move h4. Very nice idea. And this was recently played in a few games, even in a game between Vincent Keimer from Germany against Ilyushin Nuk, played at the World Rapid and Blitz tournament at the end of 2023. And interestingly, Keimer is a big specialist on this popular variation. He has been playing it very often. And I think Anish got inspired by his games. Therefore, he decided to play this system in this crucial final round game. Well, Max was not familiar with the ins and outs of the position. Played here the move rook e8. And that's a bit of a waste of time here for black. You're hoping as black that the e-file is getting open. But if not, then the rook on e8, it's not going to do a lot at all. Here, Anish goes for the move queen c2, putting pressure against the knight on e4. White is simply threatening to take. And how should you react here? Well, big moment. You can attack the queen with the move knight b4, but there's always queen b1, and the threat against the knight is still there. So knight b4 doesn't really help at all. After knight b4, there's always later on a move like a3, so the knight will be kicked back eventually. But now Max decided to take on c3. And I think this moment is very instructive, because I imagine a lot of you would expect here white to take with the queen, just threatening checkmate in 1 on g7. But this is not a good move, and it was also not played by Giri. And the reason is that black can close the diagonal with the move d4. And now after e takes d4, c takes d4, you're not really able to win a pawn by taking on d4 because black has the move bishop e5. And everything is just hanging on this diagonal. Even if you take on c6, attacking the queen, you take on c3, white captures the queen as well, bishop takes b2, hitting the rook. Even if the rook goes away, you just move the bishop first, and at the end of the line, the knight is just trapped. So taking with the queen doesn't work. It's not a good move. Even if you don't take on d4, well, then you see that black is gaining some more influence in the center, and then there's no attacking play for white at all. So the key move here, even taking with the bishop, is not great because of the same idea. With d4 there are some crazy lines, but instead you should take with the d-pawn. Very unusual idea, and it looks as if the diagonal for the bishop is closed. But keep in mind that at some point white can take and then later on play the move c4. Maybe not now, but it means that the bishop on b2 is not buried at all. It will come at some point alive. That's at least what you would expect. Black played here the move g6. Not sure that's the best way of playing, but otherwise, well, white is going to advance the pawns anyway, and still, what are you going to do with this bishop on c8? That's not clear at all. And here, white has a lot of promising continuations, and by far the most natural one is to castle queenside. But it was not played in the game. But to my surprise, well, actually I'm still struggling to understand why Anish didn't play this move. It seems so natural to bring your king into safety. It's a move you would like to play to exert more pressure along the d-file against the pawn on d5, and who knows, maybe the rook needs to be used later somewhere on the king side when the rooks are connected. Anyway, Anish wanted to launch a kingside attack straight away with the move h5, which is very tempting, and he is dreaming of mating patterns with the rook coming to h8 and the bishop covering that square. Well, it's just a dream. Black played here the move knight e5, offering the exchange of knights, and white captured. Bishop takes e5. Now at least the bishop is able to guard the dark squares. Castling queenside was played now, and note that the pawn on g5 is unprotected, but still black cannot really take it. There will follow the move f4 with a double attack. So the pawn cannot be taken. Black first drops back with the bishop to g7. Very understandable. But now white continues here with the move f4, strengthening the pawn on g5, and he's looking for possibilities to swing over with the queen to the h-file, looking for mating ideas there. Very interesting play, but I think that the next move by black was kind of underestimated by Anish, as black opened up the position here with the move e5. It's a very surprising move because the pawn on d5 can be taken either by the pawn or by the rook. If you do take with the pawn, then probably black is going to take on f4, and if you take back queen d6, you're attacking the pawn, the bishop can get out to f5, you're pawn down, but at least you're getting your pieces into the game. And also, in case of rook takes d5, you just move the queen away, and on the next move, the bishop will come into play. So instead of taking the pawn on d5, Anish is not materialistic. He wants to play for a kingside attack. He opens up the h-file. H takes g6, pawn takes g6, and now he places the bishop on d3, so that the bishop cannot get to f5. Very important idea. Black opens the center. That's a very important rule of thumb in chess. When one side is attacking on the flank, the defensive side should try to strike back in the center, making it harder for the attacking side to continue with its attacking plans. Well, e takes f4, white recaptures, and now, very important moment, black can just get the bishop into the game, hitting the rook. And this is far from clear. If needed, the bishop can even drop back to h5 at some point. Black is not doing badly here at all, but it's absolutely an insane position. Everything can still happen. But instead, black played here this move, queen c7, attacking this pawn on f4. But now, great move by white, as he played here the move rook h4, protecting the pawn, and now the bishop cannot get out to g4. D takes c4 was played, and probably black was hoping that white is going to recapture with the bishop, threatening to take with the queen on g6 as the pawn on f7 is pinned. Look at these diagonals, but here it's black's turn first and there is bishop f5 counterattacking the queen. And black is absolutely alright, maybe even more than fine here. So, look at what Anish was looking at. Instead of taking back with the bishop on c4, he just sacrifices the bishop on g6. F takes g6, black is accepting the invitation. And now after queen takes g6, you're attacking the rook on e8. And of course, the black king is wide open. One important idea is that black is not able to offer the exchange of queens here with the move queen f7, as it does run into the move rook h8. And now the bishop cannot take because of the pin. If you take with the king, it's queen takes f7. So this rook h8 idea is a beautiful deflection motive. Well, anyway, black played here the move king f8 to protect the rook. But now white continues with the move f5, and white is planning to play the move f6 next, after which the bishop on g7 is in huge trouble. Black now played the move queen f7, looking for a way to initiate the exchange of queens. But now it's queen d6, check. And whatever you do here, on the next move, f6 is going to be played. Even if you play queen e7, there is this move f6. Very important idea. Now after queen takes d6, well, you can take already on g7. You can even take with the rook first, because the bishop can't go anywhere. However, things are not that simple, because black can, for instance, play here bishop f5. And after taking the bishop at some point, well, there is counterplay with the rook coming in to e1 or e2. Maybe the other rook will come over. And objectively speaking, black should be able to hold. Well, this was not played in the game. King g8 instead was played. But now the move f6 on the board, hitting the bishop. And black cannot really stick to its extra piece. Because if you put a bishop on f8 with tempo, hitting the queen goes back all the way to h2, threatening checkmate on h8 after queen g6. So that after rook h8, the king can come to f7. You just give a check with the rook. And this is just winning for white. Because if the king runs away, well, then it's queen e2. And after, let's say, king f5, it's rook f1. This is going to be checkmate in a few moves. While the alternative is to play king g8. But then it's the move f7. Check. As the rook protects the pawn, black is forced to give up the queen. Very interesting line. So this was not played in the game. And instead of playing bishop f8, queen g6 was played. So the idea is that the queen is pinning the pawn on f6. If white is going to take on g7, then the queens will be exchanged and black is going to survive. But when you're on the attack, you would like to keep your strongest pieces on the board. Black is even threatening to take on g5 with check, hitting the rook. So the key move here is queen f4, keeping the pawn defended. But things are far from simple. And white is really planning to take on g7 or get a rook into the attack. Things are looking incredibly dangerous. But black is actually still doing fine. If you get your remaining piece into the game. Bishop f5 is what the position is asking from black. But it was not played in the game. One important idea is that if you take on g7, now it's the move rook e4, attacking the queen. And even if you now play this fantastic idea of rook d7, so that after rook takes f4, it's rook h8 with checkmate as the rook protects the pawn. Well, after rook d7, you also cannot take on d7 because of mating ideas. The rook on h4 is also hanging. Probably rook h8 as well looks also dangerous. But yeah, you're not going to do that. But anyway, what you're going to play here is rook e1. And now after king d2, bishop takes d7, rook h8 check, king takes g7, you take on a8, the rook goes back. It's kind of a forcing sequence and black is holding this endgame. This is very complicated, of course, but was not played in the game. Let's see what happened. You all want to see the fantastic end of the game. Black continues with its idea to force the exchange of queens. And if you take the pawn on c4 with check, it's bishop e6 and black is still a piece up. So this is not good. White drop back with the queen to g3, defending the pawn. And if you ever take on f6, is g takes f6 with check. Devastating mating attack. Instead, bishop e6 played. Now it's f takes g7. Finally, white is taking that bishop. And one important thing is that the pawn cannot really be taken. It runs into the move g6. And you really want to open up the files. It's very important for white to get rid of that pawn so that you can start attacking the king. Even if you go, let's say, rook h8, it's queen c7. And it's going to be checkmate in a few. For instance, well, king f6, it's rook f4, winning the queen. That's a beautiful line. If you take on g6 instead, it's rook g1, king f6, and now queen g7 with checkmate as the rook supports the queen. Black is not going to take. Black played here the move bishop f7. And if you're careless, let's say you take the pawn on c4, it's bishop g6, and all of a sudden, the white king is in big danger now. So checkmate is about to come. So instead, white needs to keep looking for forcing moves. Rook f4, attacking the queen. The queen goes back to e6, looking for the opportunity to give a check on e3, forcing the exchange of queens. But here, white again avoids it by playing the move queen to h2, threatening checkmate on h8 because the pawn on g7 is still alive. Now, important line here is that if you do give a check on e3, it was not played in the game, it's just king b1. You can give another check, but the king will be absolutely safe in the corner. Now, if you take on g7, it's queen h6, and you take the bishop, and it will be checkmate. So instead of playing queen e3, finally, black captured the pawn on g7, and this queen on e6, it still covers the 6th rank. But can you see the brilliancy Anish Giri spotted from afar? Because this is far from simple, but he needs to get rid of the defenders and open up the files towards the king. First move here is rook takes f7. Fantastic strike. If you take with the king, it's queen h7 check, king f8, rook f1. And the king is caught in a mating net. Queen f7, white captures the queen, checkmate. So black is forced to take with the queen. But now, it's the move g6 with an attack on the queen. Black doesn't have any good checks. Should move the queen. Somewhere, if you take on g6, well, then the file is open. And you're going to win the queen after queen takes g1. Queen takes g1. White is having a queen and a bishop versus 2 rooks. That should be relatively a simple task for white. So you can't take the pawn. If you ignore the pawn with queen f6, it's queen h7, king f8, and now it's g7. With check. If you take the pawn, it's rook f1 again. The king got to give up the protection of the queen, and then you take it. Game over. If the king runs away to the 7th rank, well, then it's time for discover check. Time to get a new queen with mate to follow. So everything is just winning. One other important line is king takes g6, just queen g2 check. If you go to the h file, it's just rook h1 with mate to come. King f6, rook f1, you can win the queen, or probably even more. Just completely hopeless. So black had to keep the queen on the board. Played here the move, queen e6. But now another huge shot. Rook d7 played in the game, and the rook cannot be taken. If you take it, it's queen h7 with a skewer along the 7th rank. King f6, queen takes d7, white is completely winning. Other options are also not good, because if the king goes to the back rank, well, it's then queen h6 check, king g8 and queen g7. White is just winning. While if you put the king on f6, well, it's rook d6 again, and of course the same if you just take on g6. Many ways to convert here as white. But after rook d7, Max had seen enough, resigned the game, and that helped Anish to become shared winner of the Tata Steel Chess Masters. And well, shared winner, as I said, other games were also decisive. There was a 4-way tie for first. And well, in the tie break, we saw that Anish unfortunately couldn't make it. He lost to Gukesh, and in the final, Wei Yi against Gukesh. Well, Wei Yi, the Chinese player, managed to win the event, so he's the official winner of this event. But after winning such a spectacular game, I think Anish, of course he cares, but he is more happy to have won this game than to win the tournament, I believe. Because, frankly speaking, I think it was a very impressive game. He had a really good tournament, winning around 13 rating points, which brings him back to the top 5 in the world. And that's, of course, what matters a lot to him. Probably even more than this tournament victory. Anyway, let me know what you think of this game. And very soon I will cover some more exciting games from this Tata Steel Chess Masters, as there were too many great games to see for us. So let me know, and well, see you soon again. And don't forget to subscribe, of course. Thank you. Bye bye.